country with our various reporters as they do continue to pop up. But away from that, on Monday last week, at a time when Kenya and the rest of Africa has been struggling with high youth unemployment, thought leaders called for a policy shift to reduce the unemployment gap in Africa. The African Economic Research Consortium's plenary session at the 60th Biannual Research Workshop noted that economic opportunities for African youth, women, and the whole population can be expanded by leveraging technology and promotion of youth productivity in the informal sector.
It's growing, but people have no jobs, and the youth do not see any prospects for going into the job market. With large expansion of the informal sector, as we saw in the previous session, whereas we should be migrating from the informal sector to the formal sector. So it's a challenge. We need to have discussions around this issue. We need to see what researchers have uncovered, new evidence that can guide our understanding on why this problem has persisted over the last more than 50 years.
What is clear is that we'll have an increased number of youth coming into the labor force. And there are projections out there that indicate something like by 2050, more than 1/3, the correct number is something like 25%, of the workforce will be in Africa. So we need to prepare for that. And that is why the conversation today is so very important. Understanding not only the problem today of informality, the problem today of unemployment, etc., but also what needs to be done in order to provide meaningful employment for the youth that for sure will be coming into the labor force.
Now, a lot of time people will talk about the budget, but forget the fundamentals, the fact that the reason we're having all these conversations is to drive productivity in the country to the point where it can create jobs for the youth, increase productivity of these people and their disposable income so that they can then pay the tax that will be used by government to provide the broad-based services and, of course, the space to enable manufacturing, businesses, that sort of thing, to actually drive the real economy in nominal terms. We want to get into that discussion now, and of course, joining me here in studio, as indicated earlier, John Nyangi and Solomon Kihanga from KPMG. John, of course, is from the IPF. Karibuni sana, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
I want to start off with you, John. You've seen that conversation there around the youth and employment and the fact that the sentiment is that policy needs literally to focus on creating the opportunities that will enable the economy to continue to expand so that we drive sustainability in budgeting and other processes. Do you think that is the case today?
That is not the case as it is, because when you look at the numbers, just even the economic survey and even the conversation here that just was released a month ago, indicated that where the jobs are being created mostly are in the informal sector. And out of 100 people that are getting into the job market and getting absorbed every year, at least 85 of them.
Yes, I'll interrupt you because we have to check your microphone. Same question, Solomon. The fact that we need to create broad-based policies that will drive, so to say, wealth and job creation, create opportunities for the youth, and thus expand the tax net and drive revenues that enable government have the space to operate. Do you think we're at that place?
Thank you, Peter, for that question. So, are we at that place? Maybe not yet.
Yes.
But things being put in place to try and address that, I think that is the case. And there to look at this is, especially from the youth, you realize that the current demographic majority consists of maybe Gen Zs and the millennials. And these are people who have more or less been brought up in the internet age. So because of that, then it becomes imperative for government to lay out the infrastructure that will allow the access to internet.
Yes.
And that's why we talk about the National Fiber Backbone Network and so on and so forth. So when I was looking at the economic survey, I realized that the kilometers of undersea cable has increased from around 4 million in 2019 to around 17 or 18 million in 2023. Yes, and that speaks to the investments being made to ensure that actually that is realized. If I just look at it from a tax point of view, then the question becomes, am I creating incentives
Yes.
to facilitate the creative economy, which potentially can be booming?
Yes.
And you could say, I think the government is having a hard time trying to balance that, because on one hand, I want to raise revenues, and that's why I'm going after the digital content creators. But at the same time, I'm dampening the incentives by these film producers and so on and so forth.
Isn't there a way to do this gradually so that then we don't shock the system and see then this start percolating? Because from 0 to 1.5, then from 1.5 to 6 is again a quadrupling.
Yes, and maybe just before I go to significant economic presence tax, I would want to look at it more locally. I remember around 2019, 2020, government was very deliberate in giving tax breaks, and specifically VAT exemptions for equipment used by film producers to produce. And speaking for myself, I can see the impact that has had on the creative space, because if you can see the number of local shows that have actually increased, significant, and the quality has actually gone up.
Actually making it big.
Exactly. Now, look at the Finance Bill 2024. It wants to remove the same incentive that was given to film producers. That really kills the motivation or an incentive to continue producing.
Isn't that a case of saying that maybe because of that, the speed at which success has come, then the speed at which tax must come as well is the same?
You could say that.
Yes.
But I think the way to look at it is, I would want to understand, have we reached that critical point where I've said there's sufficient production, there's sufficient opportunities created for employment? Have they broken even as a company such that at that point, the data that I am able to get at that point should inform the next tax measures?
And you're saying that the data contained in the documents that we have read so far in the survey don't say that we're at the point where we need to start hitting them over the head with taxes?
Not really. What I'm saying is the infrastructure has been put in place to facilitate that, but we don't have sufficient data to make that determination on whether to flip the taxes to bring them to what other people be subjected to. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can bring John back into the conversation. And again, same question. Do you think we're at the point where we've said that when it comes to putting in place things that will enable the youth, the larger demographics, start to be productive in this country, whether through enabling infrastructure, through enabling policy, through whether provision of technology, we have had that conversation so that they can then come into the tax net?
Yeah, Okaba, you see, I began by just telling you that we begin that conversation by looking at where are these young people going. And numbers show that they go into the informal sector. That 85 out of 100 that come into the job market every year end up in the informal sector. So do we see, like in this current budget, that sector being prioritized and seeing interventions that spur the growth in that sector? Definitely, you see that the motivation of this government is through the finance bill and through this budget is geared towards raising money from that sector rather than facilitating growth in that sector. A very good example, you find that we're seeing the internet access, the internet gadgets, the music instruments, the content creation. You find that instead of the government, through this facilitating growth, then they are focusing on there's more money, there's money created here, so we want to tax. So the ideal situation would be you grow that sector first and formalize that sector first. And then as it grows, definitely through consumption, even these people, as they consume the services, you get to collect enough taxes. So like, as much, the more people who are coming to the market are the young people.
Yes.
The people, and even you look also, unemployment is higher in that lower segment. So the government itself and the formal sector itself, that's the modern economy, is not expanding enough to absorb all this. So people now are becoming creative and innovative, and they're creating their own jobs and their own through technology. So we need to see deliberate efforts in making sure that technology is becoming almost free, almost accessible. If government has to invest in lower the cost, increase access, and deepen the young people and the youth in participation in technology. That is the only thing that will be able to.
So the question then is, because we are mostly not doing these things, now if we were then to proactively say that these are the steps that government needs to take, we will assume they don't know, because sometimes we have said these things and we are seeing different results, but we still might reiterate this, so that in the previous conversation, John, that we've had this morning, it was pointed out that the factors of production that need to get fixed include land, and you've talked about the digital aspect, that sort of thing, power. So what are the things we need to get right to get to the point at which you're talking about, to say that we've empowered these youth to become productive? What are the factors of production that they need? What is the structure around that? How do we fix the affordability question?
Yeah, the fact is that talk of land can be, definition may not necessarily be fiscal land. Talk about
yes. Again, I think there are gremlins that are eating away at your microphone. So please hold the thought. Let's engage Solomon while we fix that. I really wonder, because it takes me back to the Second World War, where the British used to say that every time they load a bomb, you have to walk around the plane and look for the gremlin, because when they pull the lever, the bomb doesn't move, and they're like... Yeah, so factors of production. You heard what the professors said, and they said that land remains an issue around collateralization. It's still in the basic stages that were there in the Stone Age for Africa. It's not yet had its second life as a factor of production at the collateralization stage. We've talked about things like the national addressing system to fix land so that anybody can find it, find ownership. And that system is chaotic today. I mean, land is such a big deal in terms of the stress it's causing people in courts. Africa, indeed Kenya's power question, some of the most expensive power in the world. Even if you're doing digital production, you have to compete at some stage. Think about the enabling infrastructure around licensing and regulation. There's so many questions to ask. Why? How come we're not seeing movement in these spaces?
Okay. I think from where I sit,
yes,
coherence in strategy is really essential.
Yes.
And when you talk about, number one, power being expensive, it's true, it's very expensive. And what you've seen is that people are now moving to alternatives. Yes. And just trying to link that to coherence. Now, if you look at the Finance Bill 2024, what it is proposing is to remove exemptions on the solar equipment that people purchase for certain projects post 1st July.
Yes.
Potentially, not necessarily, the cash outflow that will be required for that will significantly increase. And the question then becomes, as an individual investor or as a small investor, am I able to afford that?
Yes.
So probably, because number one, our youth constitute the biggest population.
Yes.
And number two, maybe at some point they do not have the muscle to actually invest in such things. Then the question becomes, then as government, given that I may have access to the land, do I come up with a, maybe you could think of a special area where I can build infrastructure to support the film and the creative space, so that that acts as a soft landing for those people who seek to venture into that space.
Yes.
But as we were talking earlier, I think then it possibly may need an intervention from a legal point of view, where if I am coming up with a strategy around addressing those factors of production that may lead to growth and therefore increasing tax revenues, am I able to